Welcome to Unplanned and Untold, a podcast that dives into the real-life, unexpected twists of facing an unplanned pregnancy in college. Join us as we listen to the unplanned and untold stories of those who have overcome the odds in order to achieve their goals. Welcome back to another episode of Unplanned and Untold. I'm your host, Caitlin Willing, and today we have a very special guest. Madison Parker is with us. Thank you so much for joining.
Thank you for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
I'm so excited. Madison actually was one of our first resident student moms, and you're our first resident student mom to be interviewed on this podcast. So really exciting for our listeners. We did interview Lauren Carter a couple episodes ago, so they got a bit of a perspective of a student mom in the community, but this is a whole different gambit, living at the Baby Steps house and also seeing how much you've achieved over the years since you've graduated from Auburn.
Yeah, well, I'm thrilled to be here. So thank you so much for inviting me. Just even looking back on the last 4 years, it's so crazy to me that it's been 4 years and that I have a 3-year-old
Oh my gosh.
But even just taking that look back into the last 4 years, it's incredible how much has changed. I'm really thankful for all of the change and where we are now. But looking back on it, it's just really hard in some ways to think about all of the things that have happened. And so, it just makes you really thankful to be where I'm at now.
Right. You've come a long way. Being able to see from the very first day you walked in the doors to now, my mind is just blown and just uber proud of you. And I can't wait for listeners to hear, all that you've overcome, because since the first day I met you, I definitely could relate to you because you're a hard worker. You are one of those women that if you tell her no, she is going to push the limits and show you that she can do it. And I love that about you, to be completely honest. I love it.
Well, thank you. Yeah, I definitely, that's one of the things that I think has shaped my journey so much. And even just comparing my journey, because even whenever you don't mean to, you do end up comparing your walk to somebody else's. And I think that's one thing that does set mine apart from other people. My age is that I was able to say no and walk away and choose the path that I thought would be best for my son and I. And looking back on it, doing it all over again, I would do it the exact same way.
That's awesome. So take us back to right around the time, right before you got pregnant. What's happening in your life before this big traumatic event happens?
So I was a sophomore in college that spring semester, and I had decided that I was going to move to a state across the country that I'd never been to, didn't know a soul. I just decided I was going to move to Wyoming.
I love it.
And so I found a job through a national park. I interviewed at the end of January, and I was out there by May 1st. Wow. So it was just super exciting, jumping on a plane in the middle of college, and just stepping into a world that I'd never been into. The weather was incredible. It was just so different going from, the hot Alabama humidity, stepping into Yellowstone National Park. I lived right outside of Old Faithful, and so it was just, incredible to be there. And completely different than what we're used to here. So, that was just such a fun summer. But by July, it's a tight-knit community. You're all living together, you're all working together. Everybody kind of knows each other. It kind of felt like a small high school in a way where, everybody, really knew each other. And if you needed somebody to cover your shift, you could just kind of reach out and they would typically pick it up so that you can, because you would typically work 5 days on, 2 days off. So you had 2 days to go and travel and explore and hike. And so that's kind of where I was at. I started dating a bartender out there. And, I could probably talk for 2 hours about, all of the details, but long story short, in the middle of that, we had just started dating, and it was a Sunday afternoon that I had just taken a nap after work, and I had a dream that I was pregnant, and I remember it just being black in the dream, and he was there, and my roommate from Yellowstone was there, and it was just a positive test.
Wow.
And I mean, we're in the middle of a national park. There are no pregnancy tests.
I didn't think of that. Oh my
Yeah.
gosh.
And we had to work the next morning, so there was just no chance of getting one. And it just felt so real. I just kind of knew.
You
I told
knew.
him at that point, I just had this dream. It was a little weird.
Right.
So Tuesday on our next off day, we actually drove down to Jackson Hole,
Okay.
and went to an Albertsons,
Okay. Yep.
similar to like a Kroger
Yep.
here, bought a pregnancy test, and I took it later that night.
Okay.
And of course, it was positive. And I remember just him and I took it together. And I remember just laughing and being like, there's no way. Like, this
This is a
is
joke.
not right.
Oh,
So I took another one.
of course. The whole box, I'm sure.
Yeah, that one was positive as well. And then, that turns into like the holy cow, this is, real, even though it
Happening.
just feels, yeah, like time just stops.
Yeah.
And it's just, you don't even know what to think. You're just not sure. This is somebody I just started dating. So at that timeline, it, was just the very beginning.
Sure.
And so I ended up going the next day to a like a clinic out there just to get an actual doctor's test, because
Okay.
I think at that point I'd taken probably 5 tests.
Just in case.
Just had to make sure.
Just in case.
And it took that doctor telling me, oh yeah, this is positive, this is real.
Wow.
Here's some options. And that was actually a couple hours away in Montana, because again, we were in the middle of a national park.
Right.
And so the next week or so is kind of a blur. Even looking back on it, I know bits and pieces are just, there are whole days during that time period that I don't remember.
Yes.
I just remember his reaction immediately being, no, we're not doing this. People my age don't have babies at this age. We need to go to Planned Parenthood, our next off day, which would have been the following Tuesday.
Okay.
Because you really have to plan things out. You have to plan out your grocery trips. You have to plan out,
You're
doctor's
nowhere.
visits.
Yeah.
Right. And so we just had 2 very different opinions on where things should go. And so I think that was really tough. Just because I knew, well, I didn't know anything at all, actually, looking back on it. But I knew that abortion wasn't going to be an option for me.
Okay.
I jokingly even remember saying in the beginning, if I'm going to go through something, traumatic and painful, I want
you want to pick the
that
one where you have the baby on the other end.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just,
I can see that.
Yeah. And so, just looking back on it, I ended up leaving that morning, the next, Tuesday morning, and just driving back to Alabama. Wow. And we had just come to the conclusion that he was not going to be involved. He just wasn't ready. And I then and now really don't feel like it's my responsibility to pursue or beg or force somebody to be involved in something that they don't want to be. Right. Whenever I know I'm fully capable of providing for this child on my own.
Right.
So that was a really hard reality. As heartbreaking as a typical breakup can be, this is, kind of soul crushing. It's a little bit different.
It's like the ultimate form of rejection. And it's very hard to explain to other people when the father of your child doesn't want anything to do with you or the baby. Yeah. I don't know if you can get heavier rejection than that, honestly.
Yeah. It just kind of felt like one rejection after another from that point on. It was rejection from him, rejection from, my family, rejection from my friends. That's just the path. Sure. That's just, you go from being a sophomore in college and living a certain life to really having to step back from that and realizing that you're about to be the sole provider for a human being who is just, innocent and tiny. I mean, so that was kind of a.
Take me back to talking to your parents. So you're driving back. How did you tell your parents?
Yeah. So I did call my mom at that clinic with
Okay.
the doctor. After they confirmed it was positive, I was like, all right, they're doctors. They know what they're doing. Their test has got to be right.
Yes.
So I called her from the parking lot there. Um, and it, didn't go great. I'm
Mhm.
sure as one can imagine. Um, so that just didn't go that great. And then what was worse was the phone call with my dad.
Mhm.
I knew I was coming home. I knew I was going to go back and live with my mom, find somebody to sublease my apartment in Auburn. Um, I kind of had a few things tentatively planned out in the works, but my mom told me that for me to be able to come back and stay with her, I would have to call my dad.
Mm.
And so I think whenever you don't have a close relationship with a parent and then you
Mhm.
have to call them and deliver what at the time was really tough news,
Sure.
um, it just, it didn't go well. He, brought up abortion
Right.
and expressed his opinions. Um, and I'd already at that point firmly decided that I was taking a different path.
Right.
Um, and so that was tough. It's always
Absolutely.
tough to have those conversations. I think the first 5 people that I told, it was just really tough conversations of like rejection. Just,
Absolutely.
you shouldn't have done this. You shouldn't have,
Mm.
just, all of the things that you've done wrong. Um,
There's
and
fear, even with them. There's
right.
fear of the unknown. There's fear of you not knowing what's going to happen. And goodness, sometimes it's out of love that people react that way because they're
Yes.
so scared for you that they're telling you, like, what are you doing? Like, this is a
Yes.
mess. You shouldn't be doing this. But eventually, especially with things like this, it ends up working its way out.
Yes. And it did. And so I'm really thankful for that, for the family support that I have now. It's just, incredible to see what it was like 4 years ago and what it's like
Right.
now. And then honestly, it just, it got harder each step of the way. Pregnancy was just really hard for me.
You were sick. You were pretty darn
Yes.
sick. Like you were probably one of the sickest women I've ever seen while they were pregnant.
It was horrible from week
Oh my
5.
gosh.
So I found out when I was about 4 weeks pregnant.
Mm.
And then, that week I came home, I was about 5 weeks pregnant. And from that moment on, it was almost like my car drove up in the driveway and my body knew I'm home
Right.
and I'm sick.
Mhm.
I think I threw up for 36 weeks straight, just about
Wow.
every day. And so that was really tough, just mentally going from being a healthier
Yep.
adult to all of a sudden you are, I mean, it is just night and day
Right.
difference. And so that was really tough. I mean, I'm running out of class in school and I would read the professor's attendance policies.
Okay.
And I remember telling one of my first professors that fall, just due to his attendance policy, the bathroom attendants, I ended up telling him that I was pregnant really early
Wow.
on, just because I was like, I don't know what else to do. I'm going to be
Right.
running out of
I
here.
will be puking during your class.
And, the
How did
first
he
couple,
take it?
he actually was one of the first people to be like, okay, that's okay.
Wow.
It's okay. Um, like strangers.
Sure.
So, Sarah was actually the first person
Yes.
at my house from baby steps. I
Right.
got home on a Thursday and Sarah was at my house by Saturday morning.
Wow.
So I think Sarah was just best equipped. She
Yes.
had the conversation before. She wasn't in that surprised, shocked
Exactly.
state that most people are in whenever you have that conversation with them for the
Hmm.
first time. So that was good to have,
Yes.
one person or that early on, with that support. But I mean, I just remember running out of class, throwing up in the bathroom, and a girl's shoes waiting outside of the stall for me and louder. And you just know when somebody's like not leaving. So I walk out and she's like, "Are you okay?" And I just
Mm,
remember washing my hands in the bathroom, like looking down and
mm,
saying, "Yes, everything's fine. I'm just pregnant."
mm.
And I looked up in the mirror and saw her face. And She did not expect me to say that at all. She definitely expected me to just say I was sick from the night before at the
You
bar.
partied too hard, of course, like most college students would have said.
So that was honestly a pretty pivotal moment for me. I
Okay.
decided at that point that I was not telling a single other person my age.
Right. Right.
um, and so, it was just so crazy to look back
Yes,
on.
absolutely.
Just all of the difficulties being pregnant. I remember even John Luke's dad um, going back through, text messages and everything on December 10th of 2019. So I was about 6 months pregnant.
Wow.
He sent me a text saying that I'd still made a mistake, that he still believed that I'd made the wrong decision. And I think at that point, you're so sure of the decision that you've
Right.
made that, I don't know, it's so hard to look back on.
Absolutely.
So I think
It's traumatic. No matter how you slice it, it's very traumatic to feel like you can't even confide in anybody,
right.
because especially when the father of the baby's not involved, it's almost like this extra layer of stigma. And I feel you on that, because that was my situation too of, oh, you're pregnant. Oh, you're not even in a relationship with them. Oh, you're going to do this on your own. It just was like an extra layer of shame in a way that I feel like I had to hide. But also people's curiosities to that drives me nuts.
Yeah, I will. The things that people said from the time, right around that time that I was 5 or 6 months pregnant, where it was really just becoming a conversation. I
Right.
remember I didn't even tell people that I worked with 5, 6
Right.
until I was 28 weeks pregnant.
I remember this
Um,
little belly. I mean, you could put a
yeah.
sweatshirt on, girl, and nobody knew. I remember it like yesterday. I was like, she's not telling anyone, and she's wearing that sweatshirt, and no one can
Yes.
tell.
One of my good friends now was actually in a class with me the semester that I was having John Luke. He was born in March. So, and I remember we had not met before. And now, she'll tell me, Madison, I had no idea you were sitting next to me in class pregnant. Because I was so trying to hide it. I was, embarrassed. I was, shameful. It was just so hard it wasn't a reality for me. Even I don't think I would have gotten maternity photos if somebody at Baby Steps, I want to say it was Hannah, that
Yeah.
was like, hey, are you gonna do this? It's kind of getting close to that time. Are you gonna do it?
Yes.
And I probably was like, absolutely not.
Yeah,
Whenever she
you were
first
very hard to take those. I remember dragging you to the front porch and be like, we won't go anywhere in public. We'll do it here. We won't post the pictures. You can just have them for a later day.
Yes. And now I'm so thankful because, I didn't really enjoy that pregnancy at all. And
Right.
so now I at least have a few photos. I'm not sure
Yes.
how many, but a handful of
Yeah.
photos from that time.
Right.
So I'm really grateful
Yes.
for that, looking back on it. So it's just so crazy. But yeah, going back to the things that people say, it's wild how many people will not know you at all and ask, how much are you getting every month in child support? Or,
Mm-hmm.
you know, I had somebody this summer ask if I had my child full time.
Oh,
And it was just, now it's less, I
right.
think. Yeah, but it's funny.
It
It's
can be
just, you can't.
shocking of just like, wow,
Yeah.
it's still personal. It's still a personal story. And there's another young lady that we'll be interviewing, and she went to my high school and got pregnant, and we never really saw her again.
Yeah.
But she went back to our reunion, our high school reunion, and people were asking her who, the father of the baby was, and all this and that, and how, what was the story, the scandal. And I was like, that is why I didn't go back to that reunion, because I didn't want that. It's no one's business. And so you've definitely done a beautiful job powering through all of that and, making the most of the situation.
Thank you. Yeah, I think it's one of those things that you just take it situation by situation. I think sometimes I've definitely had a nicer response than others. Um, so, it's just been a journey. I think, Baby Steps was a huge help. I moved into the house at the end of October, early November, and there was a mom in the house who was having her baby pretty soon after.
Right.
And so that was my first real up close and personal. That's what I'm about to go through in a couple of months.
Wow.
So I was able to get a couple of months like heads up almost of like what was to come.
Right.
So I think that significantly helped, just seeing another mom do it.
Yeah.
And then, I mean, there were other moms in the house at that point who had children, or there was one other mom that had a child at the time, one about to have
Yeah.
one.
Y'all had them all real back to back. That wave of y'all that lived in the house,
Yes.
y'all had babies.
Yeah. And it was so nice, now looking back on it, seeing 3 different moms at that point. By the time that I had John Luke go through it and experience it, and it wasn't foreign anymore. My journey was still to come for that part, but it was like, all right, well, if they can do it, then I can do it.
Mm-hmm.
And so that, made a huge difference, I think. It's just so fun being able to not know what in the world you're doing, and you can just ask the girl next door. You can go to the back and be like, hey, I know you've been through this. What do I do?
Right.
And it's a lot of what do I do? I think the first year.
Girl, it's a lot of that even when you don't have that baby in college, let me tell you. I don't care if you're married. I don't care if you're in your mid-30s having a baby. You get home and you're like, what do I do? And I think that's where people realize, especially after they have children. So my friends who have had children while they're married, all of a sudden start thinking, how the heck are these girls doing this, without a spouse, while in school full time? You were working too. I feel like I remember you had, and correct me if I'm wrong, like a shoebox full of cash that you were saving for something. Was that you?
Yes, it was me. It was me. And yeah, I kept it in the top drawer of my dresser.
Oh my gosh. I remember you like putting, I think it was like your tip money one night or something. You were so diligent and just so determined to make the best life you could for John Luke. And you worked your tail off in college to make that possible for him.
Yeah. When it's even so crazy, like even today, right before this call, I was thinking that I was actually at work one night. It was the end of February. So he was born at the end of March. So we were getting close to the end. And I remember I started bleeding at work. And my first phone call was Michelle. I was at work and I called Michelle immediately.
And Michelle is our site director at Auburn. So that speaks volumes about the relationship y'all had built.
Yes. And she met me at the hospital. Or no, she picked me up. She picked me up from work, and my mom met us at the hospital.
Okay.
And so, yeah, just all of that craziness and like that fear of what's about to happen, and everything ended up being fine. But it was just something that I didn't expect to happen. And she was my first phone call. So even looking back on that, it's just so crazy.
Right.
So I'm really thankful for somebody who answers the phone that late at night. I think it must have been after 9, maybe around 10, because we were closing. So yeah.
That is wild. What would you say was your biggest, the biggest thing that you took from living at the Baby Steps house? What is something that, impacted you the most?
Oh, that's such a good question. Probably the number one thing would be the community.
Okay.
It was just, I was in this state of survival, almost of what we kind of talked about in the beginning. You're just taking it day by day. You're not even sure what it looks like tomorrow. And it's a lot of highs and lows. Some days really suck. And so I think it's a lot of having that dinner to look forward to. Not having to cook, huge highlight for me.
Yes, we have weekly meals that we provide our student moms. If they live in the house, they actually have 2 meals provided and cooked, usually brought by somebody in the community, which is cool.
And the leftovers made it even easier not to cook another day of the week. And so I think at those dinners, just having that community, somebody else, even if they're not in the exact same walk as you, we were all, it's not isolated from society, but it does feel like that at times, that from the moment that you find out that you're pregnant, society just puts you in this box. And it just feels like they build the walls up around you of what your life has to be. And I think that's one of the things I'm most proud of is just not staying inside that box that people have told me that I had to be in.
That's beautiful. That's confidence. And at this point, you did graduate. John Luke was how old when you graduated?
Yes. So it was May of 2021. I graduated on time, which was so crazy.
A miracle. It's crazy you did that.
It was so wild. So I guess he would have been, oh gosh, 2021. He was born in 2020. So he would have just turned 1.
About a year old.
Yeah.
Wow.
A few months, older than that. So, and then we moved to Birmingham shortly afterwards. And I think that summer after I graduated in May, it was just really when that survival mode was able to be turned off. It was like, all right, I've gotten what I came back here for. I got the degree. Now what?
Yes.
Because before it was just one foot in front of the other, just get to graduation, just get your degree. And then once I had it, I was like, oh,
now what? I can breathe.
Yeah. So I think moving to Birmingham and getting my first real job and being in a workplace setting was just really, really good for my mental health.
Yes.
And just because you're just forced to grow up a little bit more, you're taking accountability for, your actions and somebody else's actions. And so it's really nice to be around a different world at that point. So.
And now you are 4 years out. Is that correct? From when John Luke was born? Yeah.
Well, from the summer that I found out in July of 2019. Yeah.
Wow. And in that moment that you found out you were pregnant, could you envision where you would be today?
Not at all. I think a lot of people, early 20s, will just say, I want a family one day. I really want a family. I was one of those people. I would say that. It's very different. Reality is just very different from this little fairy tale that you think in your head growing up of what it's going to be. And so I think it's just, I couldn't have ever imagined from that dream, then the night that I, had that dream, and it just felt so real, even from graduation, kind of that halfway mark from where we are now. I would have never imagined that I would have moved back close to my hometown and, own a house now. And just, I've spent the last 2 weeks painting John Luke's bedroom, and just, it's so fun. Now
I'm so proud of you. I mean, even owning a house, like, shoot, girl, you go, girl, like that. This is why we do what we do. Like, it's so awesome to hear it.
Yeah, no, it's just been so exciting to see, what's next, because I'm such a planner. And so this has like really rocked my world. I used to plan my entire day in my calendar, and with a baby, you don't know what's going to happen in 5 minutes. I mean, you just have to roll with it. And so I think that's been a huge blessing in my life too, just learning how to roll with the punches.
Right.
So yeah.
It's made you into who you are today. That's for sure.
Yeah. Yeah.
So if we have a listener that's listening to the podcast and she's pregnant and scared, what advice would you give her at this point in time?
The first thing would be, don't let anybody tell you no. Don't let anybody tell you that you can't do it, because you can. There are resources in the area, whichever area you may be in. There's, incredible resources here. But, just if you know something, if you know that there's a path that you want to take and that feels right to you, you can get it done. You can do it. There are a lot of sacrifices that have to be made. I feel like I've sacrificed everything, friendships, just any relationships, because you're taking a completely different walk now. So if you're choosing that path, be prepared for a lot of, sleepless nights, a lot of tears, but being this many years out of that, it was worth it every step of the way. So I would just encourage her not to feel discouraged and not to feel the rejection too hard.
Right.
But
that's beautiful advice. Absolutely beautiful. And we really hope that these stories help build these women up and let them see that your life's not over.
It's just beginning.
It's just beginning. That's right. This is literally just a little hiccup. It's a detour. We're going to pivot now. There's light at the end of the tunnel. I mean, you find a way through. You work really hard, you beat the pavement, but it makes you who you are today. And I know your work ethic has brought you a long way, girl. You have come a long way, and you've done it by yourself, without that extra support from a man. And I'm so stinking proud of you for doing it all and for achieving your dreams. John Luke's going to learn a lot from you when he's older. He really is.
Thank you. Yeah, hopefully, all good things. And I am, confident that there eventually will be a man to step in and, step in as a father for him. I firmly believe that it'll just be the right person at the right time. And now I know I would pick a completely different partner than how I have previously, just because of what I have walked through. And so I'm really thankful for that, because now the red flags are red and on fire, and from a first date if it's going to be doable or not. So
I love that. Yeah. Awesome. Well, that concludes our episode of Unplanned and Untold. Thank you so much, Madison, for joining us today. And thank you to our listeners for always tuning in. We hope to see you back in 2 weeks for the next episode of Unplanned and Untold. Bye-bye. As we all know, life doesn't always go as planned. And if you or someone you know is facing an unplanned pregnancy in college, visit babysteps.org for more resources. Thanks for joining us. And until next time, embrace the unexpected.